Hi everybody, so today I'm answering the question, how do you add security headers to a website hosted on S3? If you look through the S3 settings, you'll find there's no way to add headers anywhere through the console. And then when you look at CloudFront, it's the same problem. You can do lots of things with CloudFront, but there's no apparent way to add security headers. So fortunately, the solution to this is fairly easy, but let me show you a few things first. So there's a website called Security Headers, where you can take a look at what the status of your website looks like. So if I put in one of ours, this is a site where we haven't injected any headers at all, so it gets rated an F. If I show you one that has been fixed, here is one that contains most of the headers. You can also look at the headers in curl as well, using this simple command. So if I show you one where the headers are present first, and you can see these appearing just here, and for comparison, the STS header you can see is missing, as are a couple of others. So the goal here is to see how easily we can inject these headers into our S3 website. So this is something where Lambda at Edge is very useful. Now, Lambda at Edge is very confusing to lots of people, but it doesn't need to be. So what I'm going to do is walk you through the event model used between the interaction of Lambda at Edge and CloudFront, and then we'll look at some simple code we can use to solve this problem. So first, let's visit some Lambda at Edge documentation to see this diagram that you'll see appears frequently throughout the AWS documentation. There are a couple of things to understand here. A viewer is somebody who visits your website, and the origin is where the website is coming from, S3 in this case. And so there are four events we have to be aware of that happen. When a viewer requests a page, in the CloudFront cache, if that is already present, it'll immediately respond with a viewer response. If CloudFront isn't aware of the content, or it's expired, it'll go back to the origin, and then you get four events fired. Your Lambda at Edge function can attach itself to any one of these four events, but where you attach it is really important. If you attach it at viewer request, for example, it'll fire every single time that someone makes a request of that URL, whereas if you fire at origin response, it'll fire much less frequently depending on how you've configured your caching. Typically, Lambda at Edge functions are more restrictive than regular Lambda functions, and that's just simply because of the time problem of allowing CloudFront to complete its job of serving a page. So you have to be careful in how you plan these functions. All we're going to be doing in this example is to add some headers, so it'll be pretty straightforward. Where we're intercepting this process is the viewer will request a page from our bucket. It will request that page from the origin. We will be attaching our code to the origin response, so we'll be modifying what comes back from the origin before it gets put into the CloudFront cache. So let's just visit the Lambda console and create a new function. I'm going to call this Ask James Security Headers. We're running it in Node.js. I'm just going to select our basic execution role and create the function. Now the code that's in the repo looks like this. So remember, this function will get called, if we go back to the event model, at this origin response section. So this event gets fired after the page has been requested from the origin. So what we'll be doing here is when we get fired, we'll inject these new headers into the response and return the response. Now I'll just press save. Once you've saved the function, all you then have to do is deploy it to Lambda at Edge. And there's a couple of different ways of doing that. I'll show you both. The first is in this section. If you click Actions, just then go to Deploy Lambda at Edge. You'll need to select the distribution that you want to use, and then choose the cache behavior you want to attach it to. In this case, we have several behaviors. Most of the time, you might just find you only have the default behavior. For the CloudFront event, remember, going back to this event model, we're going to be using the origin response event. And here we just confirm that we realize this will be published globally, and then click deploy. So what have we done wrong here? So we get an error. Your function's execution role must be assumable by the Edge Lambda service principal. So how do we fix that? Fortunately, this isn't too difficult to fix. Let's just first go to IAM and create a new role. We'll say this is a Lambda service role. First of all, give it CloudWatch permissions. We use CloudWatch logging permissions here. And I'll call this role Ask James Security Headers. If I just then need to edit this role, and the key part is in the trust relationship. You edit the trust relationship, and you need to make a modification here to add Lambda at Edge. And just update the trust policy. Now back in our Lambda over here, we'll just change the execution role that we are using. I have to refresh the page to get that back. And then save, and then let's do that deployment again. Once again, I select the distribution. I'm going to choose the default behavior. Just to remind ourselves about the event, this is the origin response that will be changing. I confirm and deploy. In CloudFront itself, you can see Lambda at Edge functions by looking at the behaviors attached to a given distribution. You'll see at the bottom this Lambda function association section. Now it's already got this because we just set this up, but you can just as easily create more associations here. Importantly, this is the only place you can delete an association, so if you change your mind later and want to remove something, you'd have to do it here and not back in the Lambda console. Now this distribution has a very long TTL, so we won't see this change because remember, in this model, this response will never get called while the cache is still valid. So what we can do is bust the cache here by creating an invalidation. This will invalidate the whole cache and is useful for this testing part of the process. We'll just wait for this to be completed and I'll be right back. Okay, now the invalidation is completed, so let's test to see what happened. Well, first of all, the website itself will look the same, but if we go to security headers, put that in there, you can see now we're getting some of these headers showing through. I still haven't implemented those, but previously we had none of those headers showing up. Similarly, if we do the same test as before using curl, you can compare the before and after that these headers have now appeared. So that worked. Now what about logging? So Lambda at Edge is notoriously difficult with logging because what happens is that the logs get dropped in the region where the CloudWatch distribution is being run. So when we go to a website like securityheaders.com, we don't know where the underlying server for this site is living and which CloudFront distribution it'll talk to. So part of the art here is tracking down your log files. So over in CloudWatch, if I search for security headers, I have a few other functions that are similar, but the ones that we're after, they're showing up in US East 1 here. And if I click on that log stream, you can see the activity. So hunting down these log files can be a little bit tricky, and if you're using this in a production environment, it's worth massaging the logs to make sure they all get pushed into the same place if you need to tail them frequently. But this is a very simple function. Now remember, this won't get called every time someone visits the page. It'll only get called whenever this event gets fired. So while the page is cached in CloudFront, this won't be fired every single time. You are charged for this, so if you have a very busy site, you might see some additional Lambda charges, but for most regular sites, the charge should be fairly negligible. So that's it. So in future videos, I'll show you some more Lambda at Edge because it's really fascinating what you can do in this part of the infrastructure. But for this right now, all we've done is we've injected a few security headers into this CloudFront distribution that was serving a website from an S3 bucket. I hope you found this useful. If you enjoy this channel, don't forget to subscribe.